Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Maller Grotner Plummer Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Maller Grotner Plummer Attorneys, understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis, on the web at lawngp.com. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. rural.indiana.edu. Smithville, fiber internet, security solutions, and voice in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Bunger and Robertson, attorneys at law since 1949, utilizing experience, knowledge, and resources to help individuals and families recover in personal injury matters. Information at lawbr.com. And by WTIU members. Thank you.
Coming up on Indiana Newsdesk, tariffs have been imposed on almost all goods coming into the U.S. For small businesses and farmers, the added costs can be crippling.
If the trade war doesn't get taken care of by that time, we're going to see a huge increase in price, I'm sure.
Tariffs on China were lowered from 145% to 30% this week. The Trump administration plans to move commuted federal death row prisoners from Terre Haute to a supermax facility in Colorado.
The current administration doesn't like the fact that they were commuted.
The ACLU is suing the Bureau of Prisons to stop the prisoner transfers. And the Feline Rescue Center in Center Point has taken in more than 50 animals found at a dilapidated facility in Ohio. We'll have these stories and more right now on Indiana Newsdesk. Welcome to Indiana Newsdesk. I'm Joe Wren. The Trump administration has placed at least a 10% tariff on all imports into the U.S. The tariffs vary from country to country, but as Clayton Baumgarth reports, the impacts are already being felt, as small businesses and rural farmers who rely on foreign goods are facing higher costs.
Being a small business owner in 2025 isn't easy. There's competition from larger operations on all fronts.
Amazon has this for $10 less than what I can sell it at. We run into that. I don't sell a whole lot of books anymore because Amazon always has them on sale. And their sale price is what I buy them at generally, you know, so I can't just mark everything down and be like, okay, well, I'll match Amazon.
Kilo runs a Christian merchandise store in Washington, Indiana. She and her husband bought it in 2019 and immediately had to contend with the pandemic. Not only will they continue competing with Amazon, but they're also about to contend with tariffs on some of their biggest sellers.
We'd like to think they're U.S. made, but they're printed in China. So with even our kids' Bibles, about $40 to $60, I'm imagining they're all going to go up. So it's going to make times harder.
Bibles and Bible holders are about to go up in price at her store. And while those increased prices may hurt sales, Kilo believes in the idea of bringing manufacturing back to the U.S. She recognizes the challenges that come with that.
I see the point of trying to get things to be U.S. made. I would love to have things U.S. made, but again, when we do U.S. made, it's not as affordable.
Next door to her, another business owner also contends with tariffs and the higher cost of doing business.
We manufacture a little bit. We've started recently, and they've already messaged me saying, hey, the price is going to be $3 or $4 more higher because of the tariffs.
Davies County, where Washington resides, voted overwhelmingly for Donald Trump in the 2024 election. Davies County is tied with Franklin County for the highest percentage of voters in Indiana who voted for Trump at 81.5%. And according to Associated Press polling, the biggest issue on voters' minds was their wallets. 40% of voters said the economy was the most important problem facing the country. Now voters are watching as two of the largest economies in the world wrestle over tariffs, and the impact is hitting the most remote parts of Indiana.
We're just little old farmers out here in the middle of nowhere, Indiana, and it's a huge thing going on. You know, two of the biggest countries in the world and the most powerful people in the world are deciding these things for us.
Ludwig farms corn, soybeans, and wheat. And while he bought the seed and other inputs needed to do his job in the fall of last year, he worries about making those same purchases later this year.
All the supply that was there is going to be eliminated. We're going to be having to import new stuff, and so it's if the trade war doesn't get taken care of by that time, we're going to see a huge increase in price, I'm sure.
Ludwig says he has already seen price increases in some chemicals needed for planting season.
There are a lot of ag companies that are Chinese owned, so we're seeing some of those fertilizers and chemicals especially we're seeing take a pretty good hit.
The soybean market will affect Hoosier farmers most. China is the #1 importer of U.S. soybeans in the world. For weeks, there was a 145% tariff between China and the U.S. Now, for the next 90 days, they stand at 30% on Chinese goods and 10% on U.S. goods. The soybean industry will need to find new buyers for its goods fast or risk wasting tons of materials or selling at a loss.
Things like beans and corn are traded on global markets, so we could see demand for that go down and softening prices that will hurt farmers and agriculture in Indiana.
Other countries faced significant tariffs in early April, but the Trump administration also put those on a 90-day pause, leaving the possibility of more tariffs hanging over the heads of business owners. That uncertainty is causing fear for investors.
It's really creating a problem not only for economists, but really for all, especially in the business community. Business managers don't know how to plan for this. They don't know how to deal with it.
Lawsuits and the courts introduce other variables.
It's not clear that the president hasn't exceeded the authority of the administration to levy these, which means it's going to play out in the courts, and that adds uncertainty to what will happen and the timing of everything.
He further says that for tariffs to do what Trump intends, they need to stay in place long enough for stateside manufacturing to build up and become profitable for longer than he'll be in office.
It's going to take you 3 or 4 years to get a facility up and running, and then you need those profits from 10 or 15 years from now. There's no reason to be confident that these policies are in now are going to be in place that long into the future.
And while voters like Kilo and Ludwig recognize how price increases brought on by Trump's tariffs will affect their businesses, they both have faith that the initial struggle will pay off in the end.
They keep saying short-term pain for long-term gain. I believe that. I think that we will eventually get there. It's definitely going to be painful in the, this crop year is, we got high inputs and low sale prices, so it's going to be tough.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Clayton Baumgarth.
China and the U.S. said in a meeting in Geneva this week that they would further work to establish a mechanism to continue discussions about economic and trade relations. The Trump administration is considering cutting a federal grant program that aims to decarbonize heavy industry. That includes more than $700 million to Indiana for 3 projects. Indiana Public Broadcasting's Rebecca Thiel reports advocates worry axing the industrial demonstrations program would make U.S. industries less competitive globally.
It's hard to avoid the carbon emissions from cement because they're largely in the rock itself. The carbon inside limestone gets released when it's heated in a cement kiln. Experts say the only way to make net zero cement right now is by storing some of that carbon underground. That's what Heidelberg Materials planned to do at its plant in Lawrence County with the help of a $500 million grant. But after significant staff cuts at the Department of Energy, it's unclear if that money is still on the table.
Our ongoing coordination and communications, cadence changed. And so I think we recognize, that there's certainly some uncertainty.
The nonprofit Industrious Labs says the demand for low-emission cement is growing, particularly for building things like data centers. Cutting the industrial demonstrations program could leave U.S. cement makers behind.
And I think what we may see is companies based in other geographies and other nations start to pull ahead. And I think that's a real missed opportunity.
For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Rebecca Thiel.
And we're joined now by Clayton Baumgarth for the latest headlines from around the state. Hi, Clayton.
Hey, Joe. Indiana Attorney General Todd Rokita has sent the University of Notre Dame a letter threatening a lawsuit if it doesn't stop its diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. Rokita's 4-page letter demands the university answer 10 questions related to what he says are DEI-based initiatives. Notre Dame says as a premier Catholic research university, it seeks to serve and reflect the broader Catholic Church. Environmentalist groups protested outside the U.S. Forest Service office in Bedford Thursday against the government's planned restoration projects in Hoosier National Forest. The Forest Service proposes using controlled burns and selective logging to promote the growth of native oak and hickory trees while removing non-native pine. A government impact statement says the plan wouldn't cause long-term harm to air and water quality, but protesters disagree.
What happens to the quality of that spring water when controlled burns are done and logging is done and erosion is increased? There's just a lot of uncertainties that we don't need to tread into. We just need to let it be.
Others say they oppose selective logging because of possible impacts on bird and bat species that roost in the trees the Forest Service plans to cut. The U.S. Forest Service declined a request for an interview and referred us to its website. The Buceron Creek Fish and Wildlife Area is officially open to the public. As Isabella Vesperini reports, the area consists of nearly 4,000 acres of protected land in Sullivan County.
The land used to be the Minnehaha Fish and Wildlife Area for over 30 years until the landowner didn't renew the lease 10 years ago. It was left unused until last December, when the Department of Natural Resources purchased it for about $10.8 million.
Once we officially closed on the purchase of Buceron Creek, we started installing parking lots, signage, created maps, and a web page so that the public could access information about the site, where it is, and the various rules.
Funding included several grants and sales of hunting and fishing licenses. People are allowed to hunt, fish, and take hikes on the land.
It gives people a great opportunity to connect with nature.
Dunn said it's important to have a space like Buceron Creek to provide a habitat for native species.
This property is pretty popular for deer, turkey. We've seen bobwhite quail out here, as well as rabbits and waterfowl. It's really kind of a run of the gambit for wildlife habitat. So we've got bottomland forests, we've got marshland, and we've got those upland habitats.
Dunn visits the property every other day and oversees facility maintenance and infrastructure.
I'm getting lots and lots of questions about the fishing opportunities out here, as well as just general excitement of people who used to recreate out here when it was Minnehaha, and are now excited that we have this site back.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Isabella Vesperini.
The Buceron Creek Fish and Wildlife Area is open 24/7 and is free to the public. According to a new state report, only 146 abortions were performed in Indiana last year, the first in which the state's near total abortion ban was in effect the entire 12 months. That's a 98% reduction in abortions from 2022. The report says most of the abortions performed last year were because of a lethal fetal anomaly. Only 9 abortions were performed under the rape and incest exception. Windfall Dancers is facing a $10,000 cut from the National Endowment for the Arts. The funds would have been used for performances and educational workshops in area rural communities. The dance company had already planned to match the NEA grant, which would have built new connections in places that lack support for the arts.
Most of these rural places don't have that kind of funding. So the access to this kind of meaningful, thoughtful, artistic engagement is few and far between.
The NEA says Windfall's project is no longer aligned with Trump administration's priorities. And finally, an international snack shop opened at the College Mall last month. But as Katie Spack reports, the recent tariff changes are top of mind for its employees.
Travel the world without stepping on a plane. That's the mission of Exotic Snack Guys, which opened at the College Mall in Bloomington last month. The shop has drinks, chips, and desserts from 40 countries. It also carries different trendy foods, such as Dubai chocolate and mango-shaped ice cream. Dinesh Noon says he's seen some price changes due to the tariffs imposed by the Trump administration.
We noticed a lot of change because of the tariffs, so that's why you can see a little bit of price, but it's worth it because of the taste.
The price of imported foods has increased 13.4% through April 2nd this year, according to Yale's Budget Lab estimates. Despite this, Noon says the shop makes around $1,800 in sales every day, even if the items are a bit pricier now.
And most of the customers, they see everything, and it's like their first time seeing all different kinds of stuff right here.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Katie Spack.
And Joe, the chain restaurant or store started in Chicago and now has 32 stores in 9 states.
Looks tasty. I have to go try it out.
Yeah.
Thanks, Clayton. Mm-hmm. Coming up next on Indiana Newsdesk.
Over 50 animals were rescued from a farm in Ohio with extremely poor conditions. I spoke with keepers from the Exotic Feline Rescue Center about how they're managing with limited staff and funding.
And after federal death row prisoners received commutations, the Trump administration plans to move them out of Terre Haute. These stories and more right here on Indiana Newsdesk.
I have some glad tidings to impart. Whoa! Look at that! I'm still surprised at how good I am.
Jane Austen was my sister. I didn't think I would ever study medicine, but here I am.
Absolutely delicious, especially straight out of the oven.
I've never seen anything like this.
I think we have sufficient cause for celebration.
Recently, WFIU and WTIU lost a combined $450,000 in state funding. This loss will directly impact the programming you rely on every day. The mission of public media has never been more vital or more vulnerable than right now. We're deeply committed to providing trusted programming to this region, and we're relying on our community now as much as ever. Help us meet this moment by becoming a sustaining member or increasing your monthly gift at WTIU.org/donate. Thank you.
Welcome back to Indiana Newsdesk. The Trump administration is planning to move federal death row prisoners from Terre Haute to a supermax facility in Colorado after their sentences were commuted by former President Biden. But as George Hale reports, many are calling the proposed relocation of prisoners punitive.
On a recent Tuesday, I rode with Reverend Bill Breeden from his home in Spencer to Terre Haute, Indiana. Breeden is Minister Emeritus of Bloomington's Unitarian Universalist Church, where he preached to hundreds. These days, he ministers to just one man, Chadrick Folks, who's among fewer than 40 men housed at U.S. Penitentiary Terre Haute's Special Confinement Unit, America's Death Row. Breeden started visiting Folks almost 20 years ago. In 2002, according to prosecutors, Folks and another man carried out a spree of violent crimes, including the kidnapping and murder of a woman named Alice Donovan in South Carolina. Federal jurors sentenced both of them to death. Appeals based on Folks' history of developmental delays and fetal alcohol syndrome have been rejected over the years.
And so I got a letter from him, very childish writing. He had planned to kill himself. And he said, I want to die. And I need to talk to a minister. He said, I'm not afraid of dying, I'm afraid of going to hell. And I said, well, I think I can help you with your fear of going to hell. I said, and if you want to die, then all I'm asking is that you don't do it yet, because I said it's going to take me a while to get into federal prison.
18 years later, Breeden says Folks is like a son to him.
I'm his family, basically. None of his family comes to visit him. And so we've become very close over the years, and that's how I got started.
Breeden says Folks has made strides in the years since arriving in Terre Haute, and he thinks his monthly visits are helping him cope with the isolation of death row. But this month's visit could be the last meeting they ever have, at least in Indiana. That's because Folks is no longer sentenced to death. In his final weeks in office, former President Biden commuted the death sentences of 37 of the 40 living prisoners who were serving federal death sentences at the time. When someone receives a prison sentence in the federal system, they're evaluated for physical and mental health conditions, ongoing threats to staff or fellow prisoners, and their geographic proximity to loved ones. But the death penalty is different. Nearly everyone sentenced to death in the federal system winds up in Indiana, on federal death row. The Terre Haute prison is a high-security facility, but it isn't the most secure in the system.
The federal prison at ADX, it's basically a hole in a mountain in Colorado. It is designed to hold those prisoners who pose the greatest national security risk and the greatest risk in a prison setting. It's where terrorists have been sent, and it's where people are sent when they cannot safely be housed anywhere else.
Notes taken during administrative hearings and shared with WTIU News suggest U.S. prison officials intend to move numerous prisoners formerly sentenced to death in Terre Haute to ADX in Colorado. In recent weeks, the Bureau has been holding back-to-back hearings with prisoners to evaluate them for placement at the U.S. Supermax facility. These assessments are leading to the same recommendation, ADX. Dunham says that the pattern of ADX recommendations suggests the Trump administration is making good on the president's Day 1 instructions to review the conditions of confinement for the 37 prisoners granted clemency by Biden, and to make sure those conditions reflect the, quote, monstrosity of their crimes.
What it appears to be is essentially that the current administration doesn't like the fact that they were commuted. And so it is taking action to subject these individuals to harsher circumstances. That's not something you're allowed to do.
He says the Bureau could have previously recommended ADX for any of the individual prisoners, but never did for the vast majority receiving commutation. One prisoner, still serving a death sentence, has been housed at ADX all along. He is Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, the so-called Boston bomber, who, along with his brother, killed 3 people and injured more than 500 by setting off a homemade bomb during the 2013 Boston Marathon. But the 21 prisoners whose sentences Biden commuted were not previously assessed to pose serious risks to guards or fellow inmates.
We know that these people have not been a danger in the prison setting. So there is no rational basis to subject them to more restrictive housing circumstances.
That's what attorneys for the American Civil Liberties Union told a U.S. district judge in Washington, D.C. last month.
At the end of the day, this is retaliation, plain and simple.
The ACLU and other groups are suing the Federal Bureau of Prisons to stop the transfers and what they're calling sham administrative hearings.
We filed the lawsuit and we're seeking a temporary restraining order to stop them from moving these people.
A spokesperson for the Federal Bureau of Prisons says the agency doesn't comment on pending litigation, but last month an attorney representing the U.S. Justice Department told the court that no one would be moved to ADX until May 16th at the earliest. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm George Hale.
Indiana is planning to execute Benjamin Ritchie Tuesday morning at the state penitentiary in Michigan City. Ritchie was convicted in 2002 of killing a Beech Grove police officer. Nearly 400 animals, including foxes, skunks, and raccoons, were found at a run-down farm in Ashtabula County, Ohio, earlier this year. Isabella Vesperini visited the Exotic Feline Rescue Center in Center Point, which has taken in more than 50 of those animals.
This center recently took in over 50 animals from a farm in Ohio with extremely poor conditions. Normally, they already take care of over 100 animals, so they've had to adapt.
I've been doing this for 21 years now, and going to Ohio was it was by far the worst rescue I've ever been on. Just the conditions there were dead animals everywhere, frozen to death. Some had eaten other ones. I mean, it was disgusting.
Getting another 56 animals in the span of a couple days was overwhelming, especially with only 20 staff members.
It's already a chore, but we have a rhythm, we have a way of doing everything, and so it's just getting into a new rhythm with these guys.
Stevenson said with 300 acres of space, she's been able to repurpose old tiger enclosures to house the foxes. Staff also turned the vet clinic into a makeshift shelter for the animals until outdoor enclosures are ready. The goal is to give the animals the ability to behave naturally again.
They are just so overstimulated, they don't know what to do. Like, this is just sensory overload for them. They've never had this kind of space before.
Stevenson introduces 4 foxes at a time to each other in an enclosure. She said foxes can be very social if introduced appropriately.
He named them after butterflies in different languages. So like that's, I believe it's Mariposa. We call her Mari. There's Schmetterling, and we call him Schmetty. He's laying over there. This one here is named after a friend of his, so his name is Steve, and then there's Flinder in there as well.
Another group of 4 live in the enclosure right next to the butterflies: Ash, Ember, Scarlet, and Red.
Ember here, she rules this enclosure. She's a tiny little thing, but she rules the enclosure. Ash is trying to rule the enclosure, but like if you look up at Ash, he's now just staring up there like he's gonna go bother somebody, and they're just minding their own business.
The original plan was not to keep the animals permanently, but Stevenson said she would have felt guilty if they hadn't decided to keep them.
After seeing the state that they came in and seeing them already turn around, we'd like to really see these guys through to the end of their life. You know, just make it the best life they can possibly have. We don't really have the heart to temporarily house animals here. We fall in love pretty quickly.
The center expects to take in more animals in the coming months. Reporting from the Exotic Feline Rescue Center, for Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Isabella Vesperini.
And the best harpists in the world are at IU this month to compete for fame, prestige, and a golden harp. The USA International Harp Competition brings 44 musicians from 19 countries to compete in solo performance. The event was created in 1989 by the former chair of the Jacobs School of Music's harp department and is held at IU every 3 years.
If you just want to be inspired by somebody's desire to be excellent at an instrument and to have joy playing an instrument, come and see if your heart is touched by this music.
The event began Wednesday night and runs through May 24th. Performances are free and open to the public. That's the end of this program, but our work continues online as we cover the news throughout the week at WTIUnews.org. Have a great weekend.
Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Maller Grotner Plummer Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Maller Grotner Plummer Attorneys, understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. On the web at lawngp.com. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. rural.indiana.edu. Smithville, fiber internet, security solutions, and voice in southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Bunger and Robertson, attorneys at law since 1949, utilizing experience, knowledge, and resources to help individuals and families recover in personal injury matters. Information at lawbr.com. And by WTIU members. Thank you.